Hello and welcome to our latest Expert Connect series, the Digital Supply Chain Explained. My name is Ira Sager. I'm Vice President of Learning Initiatives for the Center for Global Enterprise. We don't have a lot of time to spend on introductions, so I'll make this quick. We're trying something new here, 15-minute webinars over 5 weeks to share the key management skills that's necessary for a successful digital supply chain transformation. Think of it as an espresso for the mind, brief but packed with lots of information. Each session is led by Vivek Galani, Manager of Research Programs and Analytics for the Digital Supply Chain Institute, which is also affiliated with CGE. We hope to have a few minutes at the end for any questions. If you have a question for Vivek, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. You'll find it at the bottom of your screen. You post a question, we will bring it up for Vivek. And if we don't have time, we'll try and respond by email. Thank you for joining us. And now I'll turn it over to Vivek.
Thank you, Ira. Welcome back, everybody. Hope that you can join today for an interesting session on DSC demand management. So for today's session, the objectives are we'll quickly go through the digital supply chain and how it connects to the demand stack. And we'll give you a few examples on how digital supply chain can influence the demand or can stimulate the demand. And then we'll provide some guidance on prerequisites for success. We'll talk about DSCI's new research on new data model and data trading, and then we'll set the stage for the coming weeks of Expert Connectivity. So those of you who joined us last week we talked about the digital supply chain. What is digital supply chain? Last week we talked about before traditional supply chain were always focused on lowering the cost of a product or a process in any supply chain. But the future of the supply chain or the digital supply chain is always focused on customer-centric. It was always focused on inside to out. Now it's always outside to in, and companies are trying to do that. And one of the way to do it and use the supply chain is to use it for revenue growth through demand sensing and stimulation, and how you can anticipate those demands and what products or how much or where you can make those products and how to satisfy your customer. I think that's a necessary step and key input to your demand stimulation models. The other thing I think companies try to do is improving demand visibility. And the way to do it, I think you need to understand or better connect to your customer. So I think most companies who are trying to sell product through a third party, vendors or retailers, now they are trying to go direct to consumer models. So I think it can help them better connect to customers and understand the customer's needs and wants in the digital era and adjust their demand planning. And the third thing I think a company is trying to improve is ability to satisfy the demand. I think once you identify the demand in your supply chain, I think you need to make sure that your company or your supply chain can deliver those products in time with the quality that customer wants. So if you look at the right, let's start with the bottom left corner, which is demand matching. This is what companies has always done and is currently doing, and definitely is an important part of what products you have and to match it to what market currently needs and wants. If you look at the top left corner, which is demand stimulation, which is really important part and connects to the digital supply chain and the whole idea of revenue growth. If you come to the right side, which talks about demand management. To give you an example about demand management, most companies have always peak seasons for some of their products. And for those products, I think companies are working whole year and trying to sell those products in the last quarter during maybe a Black Friday or Christmas or Thanksgiving, which is not great for companies that most of their financial revenue comes from the last quarter. And it's not good if you don't perform well in the last quarter. So I think most companies are trying to do is try to sell products in off-peak seasons and try to sell those products in summer or winter. So how you do that and how you can stimulate those demands, I think that's a great way to do it. The next is demand sensing, and that's a really next way or next step in learning about your customers' needs and wants. And we'll talk more about, and I'll give you two examples on how companies are trying to demand sense their customer right now and how they are adjusting their plan accordingly. So when we talk about digital supply chain, we always talk about end-to-end. It's from supplier to the end consumer and sometimes customer's customer. So when we talk about supply chain, we also include engineering, design process, and manufacturing. Because when you create your demand plan, it's always important to have a comprehensive data plan or data model and not just get data from sales, because sales plan always has, I need 10,000 TV, and then they won't be able to sell those TVs, and then you'll be left with 5,000 TVs. So I think it's always best to use comprehensive data from all the functions throughout the supply chain, end to end, from your suppliers, from your second tier, from your first tier or next tier supplier, to the customer and customer's customer. So to give you a quick example of demand sensing, one of our members is Colgate-Palmolive. And the Colgate-Palmolive, if you all don't already know, Colgate-Palmolive sells smart toothbrush through Apple. And the idea behind that is if you use the toothbrush, you'll get data on how much time are you brushing your teeth, what part of your teeth are you covering, and how healthy is your oral health right now. It's really good for your personal benefit, but it's really good for Colgate-Palmolive as well. Right now, they are not using the data, but what they are trying to do is try to use this data in their demand sensing plan and see how consumers are using their products right now, how it can affect their product design, the size of the product, and how often do they sell to this customer. And the one thing I think most of you probably know, Colgate sells through the retailers, and the one thing that they are trying right now is going direct to consumer model. So I think they already started that model, and the great way to do is collect the data on customer by doing that and using that data in your demand sensing model, because it helps you refine your demand model and how you optimize your inventory, how you optimize your manufacturing process, and how you source products or raw materials for your products closer to the customer, so you don't have to spend too much time and too much money on logistics. Let me give you a good example on Goodyear. So Goodyear was part of our group 2 years ago. And what Goodyear is trying to do is trying to create a Fitbit of tires. And by this, what I mean is, if you look at the image behind that, there is a sensor on a tire. So Goodyear was trying to put sensors in a tire where they can check the wear on the tire and how often you are driving, look at your driving record and recommend you if after 2 or 3 years if you need to change your tires. This way, Goodyear can go direct to that consumer, and you don't have to spend time, or you don't have to even worry about changing your tires, because they can directly subscribe you to their services and say, it's been 3 years, you have already drove 30,000 miles, and now it's time to change your tires. And here are recommended tires, and we can ship it directly to your home, or we can even come to your home and change your tires. So I think that's one of the good example on what Goodyear is trying to do. And most of the companies are trying to go direct to model and trying to do a subscription model, because if you have a subscription model for your product, it can really help you enhance your demand sensing model, because those data that you get from those subscription model and the users of your product, it's really the key influencing factors for your model. And while we talk about the demand sensing, I think the one thing that every company needs is the data that you feed to your demand model, right? And when we talk about data, it's not about the big data always. When we talk about the data, it's always about the right amount of data or the right influencing factors of those models that you should use. So at DSC, we developed a new data model that counts in all the factors. So let's talk about the different factors that you can use in your demand sensing model or any kind of forecasting model. So you can start with the macro factors, and you can look at different economy data, weather data, regulatory data, or political data on how it can influence your planning in terms of how you get your raw materials, how it impacts your logistics. Then you look at the customer and customers' data and how they are using your product, how often they are ordering it, and what is their interest and what will be their interest in next few years. And then you look at the different data that you are getting from your retailers or distributor or direct-to-consumer model. Also the data that you are getting from social media on what consumer really wants in your industry right now. Then you look at internally, and you look at your CFO plan, sales plan, and risk inputs, and you put all of them together and identify all the key factors. You don't have to look at each and every factor because there can be more than 1,000 factors in all of this data set. So I think you need to identify the key influencing data factors that are really improving your forecasting. And once you do that, you feed those back to the demand model and try to predict the demand and sensing the demand and what customer really want next. And that way you can also, if you have this data model, one thing you can do is try to do a recommendation engine. So if someone buys a certain product, you can recommend different products that you are selling. It can. Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, you're still coming.
Okay. Next is, sometimes companies don't have the data that they. So one thing that at DSC we develop is a data trading concept. What we mean by data trading is we don't mean big data again. What we're trying to do is if you identify a key data that you need, but you don't have access to it because you sell it through your retailer or distribution, or if you sell it through, for example, Walmart or Amazon. So one thing that you can do is try to do a data trade between those partners and see if they can give you access to those data for your data or for some discount on your products or for some any kind of rebate or any kind of promotional idea that you can do together. So definitely doing data trading can help you get those data, and using those data you can feed the demand sensing models, and you can improve your demand sensing and improve the demand overall. And the ultimate goal is to improve the revenue. So I think the top 5 issues to keep in mind when you look at data trading is what is the data needed for, and frequency and level of detail that you want, who carries the cost of preparing and pinning the data, and what is the financial impact of getting the data. And for this, we have created a data trading simulation for our members. So they can go through this simulation and see if they can actually get the value of the data they need out of it. Are there any regulatory or legal consideration? At DSA, we believe that when we start with any kind of data trading, you should not start with any kind of personal identifiable information because it can just stop the negotiation at that time. So I think you should always start without PII and then jump into PII if needed. And then does the trading partner have sufficient data protection and cybersecurity control in place? So those are the data trading concepts. And I'll finish today's session with some supply chain actions. As we talked about data, I think all the companies are thinking right now what segment of products and customer you are looking at, what data you need, where you can find those, how you can access those data. Do you need to do data trading? Or if it's sometimes companies have to do data trading internally as well, because most of the functions within a company are so siloed that they don't have a communication or a clear connection between those functions. So how you can access those? How do you use that in your model, and what actions will those drive? I think once you have a clear idea on all of them, I think you can definitely try to implement the demand sensing model and then go from there. And I think that's an overview. We didn't went too much into other demand areas, but I think demand sensing and demand stimulation are the next key thing in demand stack. But that's all for today, and I'm happy to take any Q&A now, or happy to, if you have any question later on, please send us any emails, and I'm happy to talk in detail about any of the topic and provide more examples and have a detailed discussion about it. So back to you, Ida.
Great, thanks, Vivek. And Kathleen had a question about receiving a copy of the slides, and we can send them out to anyone who's interested in getting a copy. One quick question, and then we'll wrap up. Vivek, what are the data sources that will help a company to either better sense, manage, match, or stimulate demand, and how will you access that data that you need to become more demand focused?
So back to what I was talking about when on data trading. So let me give you an example. One of our members is a footwear manufacturer right now, and they sell it through some of the distribution partners they have. So they don't have the data on actually who is buying their product right now. So one of the interesting find they got was the shoes that they were selling was bought by a 45-year-old woman, right? And they were selling product, and shoes were for younger kids. So how is that possible, and who is making that buying decision, right? So that footwear manufacturing companies right now trying to do a data trade with the distribution partner and trying to get the POS data and see if it can really help them understand the customers and how they are buying. So I think it depends on company to company, but looking at the POS data and what are the touch points you have to your customers, it can be through social media if you already have a direct-to-consumer model. That can really helpful if you have e-commerce model. It can really help and enhance your data model. So I think that way, I think you need to map out all the data points or connects you have to your customer, and then just see if any of them make sense for your data model. And one way to access to those data is through data trading. Other companies who are really mature in this, for example, Pepsi or Coca-Cola, they have a direct relationship with their supplier or customers. So they don't do data trading, but they do data sharing. So they just ask for the data in returns for proper access or better access to their supply chain or better visibility in their supply chain. So that way you can trade it either way and get access to those data. So it depends on the industry and the relationship that you have with your value chain partners. But definitely, I think every company needs to look at customers and then connection to your data partners. Hopefully, I answered that question.
No, it was very good. Thank you, Vivek. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. We'll be back next Wednesday, same time, and join us for another session of Espresso for the Mind. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.